Christians persecuted around the world. In Pakistan, the Islamic State strikes again, killing 2 churchgoers. And a Chinese missionary to Myanmar is behind bars. His son speaks out. In India, young girls, children are brutally raped and murdered. These stories and more. And it's all right here, right now, from the Global Lane. Once again, Islamic terrorists have attacked Christians in Pakistan. As people left church on Sunday in Quetta, gunmen on motorbikes opened fire, killing 2 people, injuring at least 3. And joining us with more from London is Wilson Chowdhury of British Pakistani Christians. Wilson, tell us where in Quetta this happened and what happened.
And this happened in one of the larger Christian communities there, a place called Essa Nagri. For the second time in only 3 weeks, gunmen on motorcycles have shot dead indiscriminately Christians who are out in the streets celebrating around. This time it was after a Sunday service. Last time it was around Easter Monday, when Christians were actually travelling to go to one of the overnight festivities that happen in Pakistan in local parks. As you can imagine, the community of Essa Nagri is completely terrified.
I can't imagine just leaving church on Sunday here in the United States. We'd leave church on a Sunday and just walk in the streets, and all of a sudden someone shouts Allahu Akbar and guns you down. Now, I understand 2 young men were the victims, 19 years old. What can you tell us about the victims?
Well, the victims were regular churchgoers, as were their family. They were out, having been at service. They'd just come out of a church service when they were gunned down. Again, it was indiscriminate, so it was a number of people who were coming out of church. They didn't target any particular individual. And IS, so the Pakistani IS, have now claimed responsibility. So this is now the 3rd attack in Quetta by the IS. And we raised issues with the Pakistani government over 2.5 years ago, suggesting that that large swathes of Pakistan's communities are turning towards IS, and that the situation was becoming very dangerous for minorities.
So Wilson, we do know for a fact that it was the Islamic State in Pakistan that did this?
Yes, Islamic State has now claimed responsibility for this attack. They've also claimed responsibility for the last Quetta attack, where 4 family members and one young child, 4 family members were killed and 1 young child survived with severe injury. And of course, IS also claimed responsibility for the the 3rd week of Advent attack at a church in Quetta.
How has the Christian community responded to this latest attack?
There was an immediate protest that took place, a small one, and there have been several protests calling for the government to provide better protection. Again, I think it's falling on deaf ears. At the end of the day, we reported on the growing number of members of IS 2.5 years ago. Absolutely nothing was done. When we warned about this, the government didn't respond, so we asked churches to contact their local military forces and police forces. The police then sent out letters to Pakistani Christian churches telling them that it would be safer for them not to hold services because the police could not protect them from this type of attack. If you look at how Pakistan's forming, even some of their legislation, only a month ago, Pakistan created a new law in the country stating that you cannot change your faith from Islam to any other minority faith, but you can change your faith from whatever minority faith you hold to Islam, indicating that there is simply one bias in Pakistan. You're either Muslim or you're going to have absolutely no chance of survival in this country. That's what the Pakistani government's saying. That's how they're acting. I don't think they care a jot about these Christians who have been killed.
So the government isn't doing anything. I understand that the United States gives at least $900 million a year to the Pakistani government, perhaps even more, maybe over $1 billion. So do you think President Trump has a little leverage here to use against the government if these attacks continue?
If I'm correct, I believe President Trump has already placed Pakistan on a special watch list and has, well, from the messages I remember, President Trump had already threatened to suspend funding until and improvement was made in the situation regarding how funding was being used in Pakistan, and equally the rights of minorities whose rights have disintegrated over the last few years. So it may well already be the case that the aid is being used as leverage. However, despite these threats from President Trump, nothing's changed. It's worse. It's as bad as it always has been. When we fund Pakistan, nothing changes. When we threaten them, nothing changes. This is a country steeped in extremist Islamic ideology. I don't think anything is going to change their way of thinking unless it's something very forceful, perhaps international sanctions.
And we know that God answers prayers. So what can Christians around the world do, and how should we pray, Wilson?
Well, we need to pray for solace for these families. Obviously, again, having lost members of their family, there's going to be many saddened individuals. It really, this has hit the families hard. They're traumatized completely by what's happened. I mean, some of these victims are quite young. Some of them were children. Yes, they've survived the attack, but they're going to be scarred for life. Perhaps pray for them that they can get over this without having any hatred for others imbibed within them because of what's happened.
On March 5th, 2017, Reverend John Sung Siang Xiao used a makeshift bamboo raft to cross a narrow stretch of water dividing southern China and neighboring Myanmar. He was taking Bibles and other supplies from China to Myanmar. It was his 11th mission crossing the river, bringing food and other humanitarian supplies to that country since 2014. But on this March day, waiting on the shores were Chinese security agents. He was arrested, and last month, China sentenced him to 7 years in prison. Xiao is a U.S. legal permanent resident. He's been doing missionary work in Asia for years. Our George Thomas talked about the plight of this Chinese missionary with Xiao's son, Ben.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. How is your dad doing?
Thank you for having me, George. From what we've heard from his lawyer, he's doing well, and he's been exercising and eating well in his detention center, but we haven't been able to have any direct contact with him. So all of his conversations have been through his lawyer, which have been monitored by the authorities.
When was the last time you saw him or spoke to him?
The last time I saw him was December of 2016, and the last time I spoke to him was January of 2017, 2 months before he was arrested.
What was your father charged with, Ben?
My father was originally charged with illegal border crossing, and then his charge was escalated to organizing illegal border crossing.
You and your brother Amos have decided to go public with your father's plight. Why now?
We had waited until now to see what the decision and the verdict of his trial would be. So it took almost a full year for the Chinese authorities to hold a trial for my father. And with the sentence being 7 years in prison, we felt that this was more than we expected and more than is just. So we wanted to speak out now and, bring attention to my father's work, and more importantly, to the state of religious freedom in Asia and in China.
How are you guys handling as a family, knowing that your father has now been sentenced to 7 years in prison? How are you guys handling that?
The verdict of 7 years was very difficult to handle, and it's been a very challenging time for me and my family, but we're remaining hopeful and trying to do everything we can to influence the decision of the Chinese government, and also to persuade the United States government to be involved at the highest level through the White House and through our ambassador, Terry Branstad.
Your father, as I mentioned earlier, is a U.S. legal permanent resident. He married your mother, who is a native of North Carolina. Both you and your brother were born here in the United States. You are American citizens. Your father, as I said, he is a permanent resident, but he carries a Chinese passport. What is the U.S. government doing to secure your father's release?
The U.S. State Department has asked me not to comment on their involvement, and they are more than willing to make a statement on my family's behalf and on their own behalf of their involvement. We've had support from our local North Carolina senators, Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, as well as other prominent senators like Mr. Marco Rubio and Chris Smith. So we're very grateful and thankful for their support and their action. They've signed letters to the president and contacted the former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson when he was still in office to see if there's any action that could be taken from the United States government side to help and to aid my father's situation.
I know that the U.S. State Department says it is deeply concerned about your father's situation and are pressing the Chinese government to release your father on, quote, humanitarian grounds. What would you like the Chinese government to do in this situation, Ben?
We're hoping that the Chinese government will show mercy and provide my father unconditional release immediately. So we understand that the trial resulted in a 7-year sentence that my father's appealing, and we hope that through the appeal process and through some persuasion from the United States government that the Chinese government will release him unconditionally after the appeal process has concluded.
Ben, how can we pray for your dad?
Please pray for his health and his safety, as well as please pray for the Chinese government officials and the Chinese authorities to have clarity in their judgment and have compassion and mercy in their hearts.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on the show, and we will indeed continue to pray for your dad and for your family. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
The rape and murder of 2 little girls, one 8 years old and the other about 10, in India, is highlighting sexual abuse against lower caste women and girls in that nation. Joining us with more on this tragic story and to explain what his ministry is trying to do about it is Joseph D'Souza. He's president of both the Dalit Freedom Network and the All India Christian Council. Joseph, were these girls Dalits, and how common is sexual violence and rape in India today?
On the question of rape, I am embarrassed, ashamed that the culture of rape has only increased and violence against women has only increased in recent years after that horrific case of rape in New Delhi, where there was such an outcry. There have been several rapes, Gary. The one that everybody right now is focused on is the girl Asifa in the Jammu and Kashmir Valley. She is from a nomadic Muslim tribe. So she is a tribal girl, even though religion is Muslim. Her rape actually happened on March 11th, and it's taken the media and others to wake the nation up and to report what's happened. And before that, we had a rape of another woman in the state of Uttar Pradesh, this time with one of the BJP MLAs. And a lot of uproar had to be created for that man to be arrested. And there was another rape of another girl in Surat, Gujarat, of 8 years old. And what we are seeing is a culture of violence and rape against vulnerable women for all kinds of reasons. And this is something that actually cannot go on anymore. And it seems that society and culture has forgotten what happened in Delhi a few years ago. And this has only increased, and the law is not able to deliver.
Well, Joseph, why is it increasing, and who are the likely victims, and why children?
Yeah, I'm on record saying there is a fundamental problem in the mindset of the Indian male population. It has to do with our culture. It goes across caste and religious background, and the value attached to a woman is second to the value attached to a man. There's such inequality and discrimination And that's why we have had things like dowry, bride burning, and every form of abuse that women face.
Okay, let's move on a little bit beyond rape and we know about prostitution in India, and here at CBN News we've done stories about Nepali and Tibetan women who have been lured into the country for that purpose. But what about sex trafficking, and especially of children? Is that commonplace? Is that going on?
Yeah, there is a significant problem of child sex trafficking, and again here, especially here in this situation, the tribal and Dalit girls are the most vulnerable. And there are villages in parts of India. I live in the state of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. There are villages in India, in my part of the country, where you won't find teenage girls in many, many villages because those girls have been trafficked into the sex trade.
So what is your ministry, and what are other Christians doing to make a difference in that?
What we have done is we have started community programs in the villages and the groups where these vulnerable girls are sold either in South India or North India, and beginning to teach the women their rights, their constitutional and legal rights, and we come alongside them and teach them how to not succumb and not sell their girls. And where there are vulnerable girls, we actually have started shelters for them and put them in school and give them all of the social legal protection we can give.
Americans are mourning the loss of one of their favorite first ladies. Barbara Bush has passed at the age of 92. Jennifer Wishon brings us more.
Barbara Bush, America's grandmother, the matriarch of the Bush political dynasty, and just the second lady in history to be both wife and mother to U.S. presidents. A no-nonsense woman known for her pearl necklaces, quick wit, and fierce love of family. Her husband's silver fox.
Well, I think I have had the luckiest life in the world. But I think if you have someone like George Bush to share it with, it makes it considerably easier.
In this 1992 interview with CBN's Terry Mewson, Bush explained what was special about her family growing up.
We sat as a family around a table 3 times a day. I think that's something people can try very hard to do.
Born Barbara Pierce on June 8, 1925, she grew up in a suburb of New York City. She was 16 when she met her future husband at a dance. The couple had 6 children and together endured the death of their daughter Robin, who lost her battle with leukemia when just 3 years old.
And of course, I have great belief in God, and so does George Bush, so that helps a lot.
Bush was a fixture in Washington for more than a decade, serving as second lady while the Reagans occupied the White House before moving in herself. As First Lady, she focused on improving literacy among parents and children, believing better literacy can solve many of society's problems. In a note to her alma mater, Smith College, shortly before she died, Bush wrote, "I am still old and still in love." She was a popular First Lady and celebrated by many at the end for choosing comfort care that allowed her to enjoy her final days with her family. In her 700 Club interview, she encouraged young couples to make family their top priority.
I think it's nice to pray together. I think it's nice to tell your children you love them. And I confess I did not grow up where we said that to each other. We were rather stuffy, I think. But now I have no qualms about telling people I love them.
If you're an educator or a student in America, you're more likely to know what Common Core is. To put it in a simple way, it's a method used by 42 states and the District of Columbia for testing student knowledge on various academic subjects. Embroiled in controversy for nearly a decade now, some parents and educators praise Common Core, while others believe it places undue pressure on schools, teachers, and students. Well, here to set us straight is Nicholas Tapio. He's Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. He has a new book out called Common Core, National Education Standards and the threat to democracy. So, Dr. Tampio, how is the Common Core standard hurting our democracy?
Well, one of the things that I learned about when researching this book is that intelligent people disagree about how to teach math, reading, writing, history, science. And when you come up with a national standard that says what all children are supposed to do at the end of every grade, you're basically empowering one group of people to make that decision for the whole country. And everybody else gets left out in the cold. And what you're seeing in America right now is a lot of people who are very upset with how kids are being educated in the local schools. And there's almost nothing that they can do.
Well, I'm sure the needs in, say, Oklahoma are different than Washington, D.C. or suburban Maryland, correct?
Well, I mean, I'd say that schools are better when they have the enthusiastic support of the community. And so right now, most states adopted the Common Core as part of their Race to the Tops application in 2009 and 2010. And so if you have a problem with the local school district, there's almost nothing you can do. I mean, the decision was made in 2009 and 2010, minimal public debate. And, you know, a lot of parents are upset about how their kids are learning math. A lot of parents are upset about how the focus has become about standardized testing. And so, you know, I believe that education is at its best when teachers, community members, students feel invested in it. And that's not what we're seeing right now.
American students seem to be falling behind compared to their peers in some other industrialized nations. So how could we raise our education levels and standards then without Common Core?
Well, for the test that people discuss when talking about America's ranking is the Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA. And so the fact of the matter is that Westchester County, Montgomery County, wealthy suburbs are not suffering right now. If they were their own countries, they'd be doing great on the PISA. I mean, the problem is that we have certain poor communities in America that are dragging down our average. So to say that all of America's schools are failing doesn't bear scrutiny. I myself think that we should do things to help communities that are in poverty. I mean, that, you know, we could debate about how to do that, but to say the sky is falling clouds our judgment about what needs to be done.
Some people believe that we should place more emphasis on vocational schools and specialized training. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, if a community wants to do that, I'm okay with that. I suppose I'm okay with that. My personal view is that being young is a chance to learn all about the riches of human civilization, to learn about the marvels of science, to read novels, to learn some social studies, to go as far as you can in mathematics. And, you know, my view is concentrate on the present and let the future take care of itself. So we don't know what the jobs in the future are going to be. Why are we going to make kindergartners miserable because of what we think the jobs might be in a couple decades? That doesn't make any sense to me. My view is make the educational experience rewarding and let the future take care of itself.
I know when I was young, I wondered when I would ever use algebra. And to be honest with you, as an adult, I haven't used it that much. So, anyway.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about the Common Core resistance movement. You say it's not about Democrat or Republican, black or white, rich or poor. So what is that all about?
Well, in New York, there have been years where about 200,000 families refused for the children to take the Common Core tests. And one of the very exciting things about the test refusal movement has just been how diverse it is. And for me, at least personally, it's been a wonderful opportunity to realize people are people, you know, that they're not Democrats or Republicans. They're parents who are trying to do the best for their kids. And on this one issue, we just come together, and it doesn't make any sense to cling to partisan ideologies. We just say, listen, schools are not doing what we want. We might disagree amongst ourselves about what we want for the schools, but we can come together that the Common Core is not what we want.
Florida's Disney World is a top global destination for travelers seeking a fun family vacation. Soon, the United States may become known as another top worldwide destination, but not for fun. Teens and young women unable to obtain legal abortions in their countries may now illegally cross the U.S. border, and the government will be forced to facilitate their abortions. That's what one U.S. District Court judge has just ruled. The Hyde Amendment prohibits federal taxpayer funding of abortion, but what Judge Tanya Chutkan said is the federal government cannot block pregnant illegal immigrants from leaving detention centers and visiting clinics to get an abortion. President Obama did not stop detained pregnant illegal immigrants from getting abortions at their own expense. But President Trump changed that policy. He said if pregnant illegals want an abortion, they can return to their home country or seek a private sponsor in the United States to help them. The U.S. government would not help facilitate the murder of an unborn child. But Judge Chutkan, an Obama appointee, said that policy infringes on the constitutional rights of pregnant illegal immigrants. Really? I didn't know that immigrants who break U.S. law, cross our border without permission, have the same constitutional rights as U.S. citizens. Yes, they have rights. The right to be treated humanely, processed for entry, or be sent back to their countries in a timely manner. But unless their life or health is in danger, the right to have the federal government facilitate their abortion, The judge also said the Trump administration policy effectively prohibits pregnant illegal immigrants from the right to make her own reproductive choices. Well, Judge Chutkan, what about the choices of the babies? What choice did they have? None in this ruling. What about the choice of American citizens who don't want their tax dollars being used to help facilitate abortions for illegal immigrants? No choice. This faulty decision by one judge sends a strong message to the rest of the world, and especially pregnant teens in Central America who can't legally get an abortion in their home countries. The message is this: come to the United States, a land of opportunity with legal and free abortion. All you need to do is get to the border, cross it, no visa needed. You may be detained for a while, but you'll find some private individual or a group willing to pay for your abortion, and then the federal agents will help you facilitate it. Judge Chutkan, I don't think most Americans want to become an abortion destination for illegal immigrants. And let me remind you of this. It's from Psalm 139, 13 through 16. God knit each of us together in our mother's womb, and his eyes saw our unformed body. All the days ordained for us were written in his book before one of them came to be. Yes, God has a plan for our lives, a plan that began in the womb. Who are we to play God and destroy that plan, snuff out that life? If you're watching this and you're considering an abortion, meditate on this verse from Isaiah 49:15. Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. Yes, God hasn't forgotten you or that child you carry. May his Holy Spirit guide you and all of us. And may we have compassion for children born and unborn, and compassion even for those who come here illegally out of desperation. But let's not encourage or facilitate their abortions. Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.